All right, we're gonna call the General Government Committee meeting to order. We have Jeremy Hall is coming, but he may be a little late. He's at a fire or something. So we're not gonna say he's absent yet. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. How about our minutes from our September 11th meeting?
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Are there any public comments? Not aware of any public comments? All right, is there any supervisors not seated as committee members that have any information for this committee? All right, we'll have the annual budget and budget amendment recommendations.
Your hand. Well, I think this is the second to the last time we'll present on the budget at General Government Committee this year. Here's where we are. It's the time of the year where it's the opportunity for committees to consider their budget priorities and think about whether the things they want included in the budget are included in the budget. The administrator will present the budget formally to the full board next Tuesday evening. You're going to get a preview today. And then assuming that we can come to agreement between October and November, the budget will pass in November, and then we'll be all set for another year. Okay, next slide, please. So what we've got here are FY23 budgeted revenues and what we're projecting for 24. And I just want to point out that a graph that was shown last month, the budget wasn't in error, the graph was. So if you're detecting differences in the numbers here from what you saw last month, those are real. We made a mistake, but the budget was right. So last year we budgeted revenues of $69.2 million. This year for 24, going into 24, 63.1. Pretty easy math. Our revenues went up 200,000 bucks, roughly. Let's get exploded version of this graph. Okay. So by revenue sources, this is what the budget will look like, and Vince will present next Tuesday. 37% from property tax, state aid's 25% around the wheel. You've got it in your packet. Not a very different pie graph than last year in terms of proportions. Not a lot more money to work with. And remember, we had $562,000, $66,000 of shared revenue. So things are tight. And we've been enforcing that message with division directors and department directors, and they've responded, I think, wonderfully to a challenging budget year. Okay, let's look at expense side. Oh, sorry, let's look at levy. Yeah. Supervisor Hall asked a question last month about our surplus and whether that was indicative of us taxing more perhaps than we should have. Our levy's really, really flat. We had net new construction of $306,000, but because we're spending less money on debt service, there's not much of a change from 23 to 24 budget. That's not 4%. That's 0.4% difference in levy. And presumably we're allowed to tax for net new construction because it means the county will have more services to rent. So super flat. And in an inflationary economy, I'll point out. Okay, enough of that. Next slide, sales tax. Great news here. Our sales tax has been going up. We're trying to tighten our budgeting of sales tax. We've talked about this a couple of times recently. we're forecasting we're budgeting 4.85 million for sales tax. Last year was 4.4. That helps us on the revenue side. Any questions about what you're seeing so far? Okay, now let's go to expenses. Budget expenses last year were 65.8. That was more than revenues, but it wasn't a structurally unbalanced budget. The difference in expenses came late in the game because the supervisors decided to do some important projects that were capital. So we added some more money for the Justice Center roof, some more money for recycling late in the fall last year. And that's why expenses were higher than revenues. Our projected expenses this year before any additional funding requests, 63.1, same as the expenses. You'll notice that this piece of the pie is bigger here than it is here. That's personnel. We're going to talk about the why on this in a little while with the wage study conversation, different agenda item. The personnel going into 24 forecasted at just over 34 million bucks, just over 32 million there, 6% difference. That's the big change from 23 to 24. Okay. Next slide. I think I just covered this. So on Tuesday of next week, Vince will introduce, and you've seen these lists before, but formally introduce a list of additional funding requests totaling $1.2 million. If you look in this column, you'll see that 3 of those will be funded from the 110 fund, which is sort of our internal family loan fund. That doesn't require a request to the board. You don't have to do it. You can tell us not to do it if you want us not to do it. But we can fund these without having any further impact on the budget. So that's 285,000, ones that are marked in purple. You take that out, we'd be asking the board for 940,000 and $50,000 to come out of the general fund. Just over 940,000 bucks for capital improvements. Questions about that list? I think you've seen it before. Happy to discuss anything. We've got folks in the room that can go deeper if I can't get all the way.
Don, can you explain the increase in professional services, that 4% growth from the pie chart from
Why
before?
don't we go back? 24 to 20. So professional services would include consulting dollars. Anything that we buy that we can't provide ourselves. I would have to go in and look for the specifics to understand what moved within that budget category. I'd be very happy to provide that.
Would that include legal fees and?
It would include legal fees. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go back one slide, Claire, please. Any questions about what's on this list? Next slide then. We see these tags provisionally approved. That just means the administrator has provisionally approved these, but it's ultimately up to the board. Okay, we have some operating requests. Oh, could you go back for a second? Yeah, so you've heard us talk about these positions before. We've got a corrections officer for building security. So that's a jail employee that will supplement our front desk folks' hours at the Justice Center and here. Previously, you passed a no-cost FTE bump of 2 because what we did is we let Permar go and we're hiring people to do this. And a third person is needed to cover vacations, to cover every breaks, any time when sick time, when someone's not available, that is one of those first 2. So we're asking for for an officer to do that. And that person would also be available for the jail. So I think
That would be an additional FTE?
that's an additional FTE.
Is that, excuse me, but is that replacing a present cost now? Are we,
Well, that's a great question, sir. So 2 months ago, when we had the discussion about taking the money from Permar, and Don can help us with this if I get out of my depth. There was no cost to that because we took the money from Permar to cover their 2 folks. Now, we've always needed more coverage there than we've had. And so this would provide us plus some backup in the jail. And Don, let me know if I didn't get
Yeah,
that
basi-
approximately correct.
Basically, what we took what we were paying Parmar and my part-time corrections line. We just don't have any part-time corrections employees. Combine those 2, that easily covered 2 positions. And then the 3rd position, so we'll put 1 here, 2 at the Justice Center, and they'll rotate to make sure we have good coverage.
And the dispatcher position, I think the sheriff's been arguing for this for a few years, certainly did last year. I think prior to that too, Don, you can help me out if I'm wrong. So these are the dollar amounts associated with those 2 positions. Those, to pay for those, that money is currently in the administrator's contingency because it's not approved. If you approve it, then it will move out of the contingency into Don's budget line. If you don't approve them, it will be returned to the county. So. Next slide. We have a special request or categorized as special AFR. This is the $200,000 that's under discussion to support the loan program to municipalities for housing initiatives. And as another agenda item, the administrator will walk you through how we're planning to get information from municipalities and award those loan dollars if you approve this expense. So this would encumber $200,000 of the general fund. It's not an expense. When we loan the money out, it'll just be recategorized as a receivable. Next slide. So we had additional funding requests that were articulated by department or division directors and that were later removed. Restrooms at Apple River Campground, and Mo's here to correct me, but I believe that's because we didn't get the grant, didn't want to spend the $90,000 this year because there's a good chance we'll get the money later on. Got that about right? Dana and Scott Good decided that we actually didn't need a new Wi-Fi system in Golden Age Manor, so that's been stricken from the list. Learning management system, we're going to figure out how to do that in a different way. That's a way to provide professional development to our employees in a digital format. And HR would run that, but we're gonna figure out how to do that differently. Stour parking lots, not gonna do that this year with all things going on with Stour. Contribution to feasibility study for potential rec center project that was pulled. And we're not gonna do the dock at Lotus Lake. So those were all removed. Next slide. These are additional funding requests that the administrator's chosen not to take action on. So we have a building next door. Someday, something will need to be done with that building. The estimates range on the low end to do the minimum amount of renovation, just under $500,000, up to making it a useful office space, $2 million. This is really just a signal that at some point, something will need to be done with that building. The administrator's not proposing taking any action on that. Our financial reporting system is not well suited to the complexity of our organization anymore. We're going to need to replace that at some point. This next year, we're going to be doing a number of system upgrades. We don't know that we have capacity to do that as well, so we're going to put that on hold. We had 2 requests from CJCC. One was for a person help us with pretrial supervision. The judges are very favorable on this. This is when a person has been arrested and they're released on bail or bond. And there's some concern that they'll get another charge. And so they have someone who's helping them kind of stay on track. That's what that would be for. The Department of Justice is not providing us any resources for this, so we're going to put that on hold. Professional service for planning projects, that's in Bob's area. We hired a planner. Case management software, we're going to figure out how to do this a different way. So those are on hold. Next slide. I think that's it. Any questions about the preliminary budget view that I could answer for you?
Just because I've had 2 calls since our last meeting about this, and I know it's not anything that's in here. And this is something that I've had to learn about as I got these questions because I didn't know about it, but the county's payment to libraries for the rural use,
Yes.
I have that framed right. So I got a call pointing out how there was a plan that they pointed to that said 100% by 2024. And I don't specifics, I have no idea, but they had said something about 95%. So I just need to know what
Sure.
information to be able to tell them.
Yes, so there is a resolution that lays out a plan to get to 100% funding for those rural libraries, no question about that. And the board has been enthusiastic about moving the county from 95 or from 70 all the way to 100%. And one of your fellow supervisors asked if we would consider doing that. That request came in relatively late in the game, and there has been a process that's been followed in previous years, beginning with the libraries. And I think Vince can address this, but that the libraries didn't get together this year and ask us for that additional 5%. Now, presumably you have the power of the purse here, and supervisors can do what the supervisors want to do. But Vince can more fairly address this, I think, than I can.
There was a resolution passed a few years ago that said, hey, let's bump them up. And then let's have a goal of getting to 100%. There wasn't a year, there wasn't a date or an end date.
Yeah, I read it. I didn't see like by this time, it just said 100%.
We did go up to 95% of the maximum that we are allowed to. The couple of things. One, they never came and asked for the money. And so we get an individual here and there say, hey, give more money to the libraries. And I say, why? Well, because we should, but we never get a request from the consortium of libraries, which is what happened several years ago, to say, what is your financial situation? What's the money going to be used for? Why are we giving you this money? And how are you going to be accountable for it? So I'm reluctant to encourage us to say, well, somebody asked for more money, let's just send them 50,000, which is about what it's going to cost the taxpayer. Because this doesn't come out of our budget, it just adds to the levy. Secondly, I did check just a few, everybody says, oh, everybody's going to 100%. So I just called 3 of the administrators that I know. St. Croix County, they do fund at 100%. Burnett County funds at, I think it's 75%. And Barron County funds at 77%, but the recommendation this year is that they're going back to 70%. Haven't done that yet, but that's what they're saying. And it all comes back to that issue of accountability. Why are we going to give them more money if we're not exactly sure how they're monitoring and tracking how many head count they got coming in? So at this point, I think it's best that we wait until they actually do a formal request and the supervisors can ask those questions. Why do you need it? How are you using it? And how are you monitoring that the numbers you're giving us are accurate? I mean,
So if I'm say whatever library and I see this plan that says that the priority is to fund the rural usage at 100%, why would I then come and ask for that when it's already spelled out that that's the priority to do that?
That's the process. Everybody comes to us every year, right?
Every
Outside
outside
agency asks us for money.
We still want to know what it's for.
Right. And, you know, I get calls a lot. You know, we got one from the snowmobile club saying, hey, we want a new groomer. Send us $102,000. It's like, no,
Yeah.
we don't just send money out.
So then
to
my-
people who
my-
ask for it.
Just so I know then. Just because I need to give an answer, so when they say, why was that plan not followed, I tell them because the libraries didn't ask for it.
No, the plan is followed, is what you tell them, but there's no specific timeline that said, and that was one board of supervisors who said, we have a goal of getting it to 100%. They didn't say when. And it doesn't, we reserve the right, I think, as a board to say, we can change that because we need to see their presentation, their financial status, how they're gonna use it. I don't think it's wise for us to just say, oh, you want money, you're a good agent, you know, we like what you do, we're gonna give you money. But we need some explanation and some accountability.
I mean, I still don't feel good passing that along as the answer when it says priority, promote equitable and well-funded libraries, strategy, provide 100% reimbursement to each library. Then it gives,
That was a policy of a previous board, and this is a completely different board, so they're setting an expectation, but they didn't put anything in there that obligates this board or this administrator to put in to his budget that previous board's statement. The Library Federation used to come and do a very good presentation with a lot of information about, you know, here's the folks that live outside of the municipality that come into the municipality to use our services, to use our libraries. And it was very well received. I think that's probably why the board said, hey, we should look at really funding these folks 100% in the future.
we haven't gotten that.
And we haven't received that in years. I think since
Have we
that,
asked for it?
well,
Well,
I
they
mean,
asked for it.
really,
Yeah.
I guess. If
The other side,
libraries
Ryan, if
felt
they
strong-
needed it, you'd think they'd come to us. It'd be very apparent that they don't particularly need it or they'd have been coming to us.
We don't go out and ask everybody what they want us to pay them for. They gotta come to us, and they have in the past. It's been very, very organized, the whole.
So it sounds like I should tell them that there needs to be more coming to the county from the library.
Absolutely.
And be accountable to it.
That's the way it's been in the past and will be in the future.
Alright,
I'm
that's
sure.
the messaging I'll go with then. Thank you.
Any other questions about that budget preview? If not, I'll have a seat for a while.
All right, that'll take us to a discussion and possible action regarding resolution 4023. Public hearing on the budget. Are we gonna have any discussion? Need any?
This is what was proposed last month in terms of the amount. It was increasing. Oh, no, this is the budget. Yeah, I don't know that we need, this is mandatory every budget year. But we announced to the public, we're having a public hearing in November prior to the board.
This is the same as we've always
Process.
used. Same resolution.
Yeah,
So you just need this resolution moved to county board.
yes.
Make a motion to move resolution 4223 to the full county board.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. All right. Now we have 4323 to set the county board compensation for the term 2024 to 2026. And I think it's our resolution, isn't it?
Yes.
Where did we come up with these figures at? I don't remember.
That was our last meeting,
At the last meeting,
our last general government meeting.
I was here, but I don't remember which meeting I was at to come up with these figures.
It was at our last general government.
Okay,
Is this the resolution we want to send? Our resolution from this committee. Guess if it's a yay, we'll get a motion to send it. Otherwise,
It was a 50% increase across the board, right?
pretty much.
Yeah,
I think so.
6,000 to 9,000 for the chairman. 1,500 for the vice chairs.
I make a motion, we approve this and, or adopt the recommend resolution 4323 to the full county board for consideration.
To see it die for lack of a second.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? I guess we'll have more discussion at the county board.
Right.
Hopefully.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. All right, we're looking for a presentation regarding the investment policy revision and current investments.
This will just take a second. Claire, I think we have one slide on this, maybe two. I think these are probably out of order. Yeah, I think we need to go, the one says $75,000 or up. Keep going, that one. Let's just go to the next slide here. Past that. Okay, what you've got in your hands is, that's a picture of what you've got in your hands. Let's go to the next slide. So what is this? By financial policy, the General Government Committee is to review all payments that are $75,000 and up. And this is a list of those payments through the end of Q3, so through September 30th. My sense is that this is a holdover from the old administrative coordinator form of government, where the General Government Committee was not only reviewing, but approving expenses. I think it's useful for you to see where we spend our money. And this is just me hypothesizing, but my guess is it's more important for you to see the big picture where the money goes than the list. So if you look at that graph up there, it shows you, these are only the checks written that are $75,000 or up. There's lots of checks that are smaller than that. But we've been talking a lot about healthcare and healthcare related expense. The number one position here is health partners. Then we've got basically interest payments. We've got facilities improvements. We've got paving roads, buying equipment, cell phone towers, transfer payment of public health, paying some Midwest One. That started to get into small things, but you can see that the aggregate here kind of tells a story of where our money goes. We will continue to do this for you each quarter now, to give you a list of the expenses over $750,000, unless when you're reviewing financial policy, you want to do something different. But this is part of the current set of financial policies. Are there any questions about this list or discussion about what we ought to be doing differently with this?
Since it sounds like this is something, I would agree that we as a group don't need to sit and approve these things, and that it's good to see the snapshot of that. So is that something that we need to discuss as a group to change?
I mean, this would be for the chair to determine, but my sense is that would be appropriate when we're looking at financial policies overall. And we'll just earmark this for particular consideration since to staff, it appears like something that's kind of a holdover from a previous age. If there's no more questions, I'll sit down again for a second.
Just a very quick look at what we're doing with our investments right now.
Thank you.
So basically, we have 3 funds in our investment company of PMA. Our general investments, our health insurance fund, and our ARPA fund. Our ARPA fund was 0, but then we had the dividends or the interest that accrued over the month that they paid us out. So we will finish closing that, and it'll be closed officially at the end of October because those funds have been spent by the board. The general fund, we basically have in 4 categories. We have what they call our cash funds, which is CMS and IS. That's similar to the state investment pool. So it's funds that are kept there. The rates as of today are 5.16 and 5.31, not 1.31. Sorry about that. So that's where the money is when when an investment comes matures, it transfers into there. We've been leaving more money than normal in there just because the rates are so good. We have CDs, we have them laddered. So every 3 months through, I think 2026, there's some that come due. Average is about 500,000. Sometimes it's 250 in CDs and more in securities. Sometimes it is more in CDs and less in securities, or there might not be any securities in that 3-month period. They range from 4.915 to 5.365. The lower numbers are ones that were taken out last year or the year before. The higher numbers are ones that have been taken out in the last 6 months. We do have some treasuries. The rates are much more extreme because some were taken out 2 years ago when the rates were much lower. The majority of them are in the closer to 4 and 5 range. And again, those are laddered. And the point that we do with our investments is that every 3 months we have money that comes due in case there's something comes up in the budget or by board motion that they need funds for, then we can transfer it out. But this way we keep it in an account where it gets high interest. The health insurance fund is similar. We do not have any CDs in the health insurance fund just because the securities when they opened this fund were higher than CDs. The rates are 2.89 to 2.99 because the securities were taken out in 2022. When they were at that point, they were higher than anything else. So it was good at that point. They mature from this December on through June of 2026. And then again, ARPA was just the dividends. And again, those numbers in the IS are both 5.31. We have a meeting every 3 months for the investment committee, and that includes Don and the board chair, myself, and then a lot of times Sherry Poyer sits in. And I think that's it. Sorry, that's right. I knew there was 4. And so we kind of go over things and make sure we're all on the same page. We do spend a lot of time talking with the PMA people so that we know what's going on. They send updates every time the market does something, which is frankly quite often lately. Everybody keeps thinking that rates are going to start going down, but they haven't. So we're just kind of waiting. We do have a money market account at Midwest One, and that is at 5.016 right now. That also fluctuates on a kind of a daily basis. That is so that we don't keep all of the money that we're spending through our budget and our checks in the lower interest account, and we transfer that money out of the high interest account into our checking where our checks are actually written out of as needed. And so that's kind of why we have one there, and that's worked really well, and Midwest One has been very happy with that process also. The CDs are all in 250,000 increments or less. And that is because that is fully insured by the FDIC. The treasuries are fully insured, so we don't have to worry about those. And then the money market at Midwest One is also fully insured by investments that, or insurance processes that Midwest One takes out in our name and that we get a report on every month. And then we also keep that information on a monthly basis and give it to the auditor. So everything is fully insured. If something were catastrophic to happen, we may not get the interest income, but we would always get the money that we initially put in. So that's kind of the important part. Is there any questions? And I don't see anything catastrophic occurring at this point. Any questions? Don, do you have anything to add?
I do have just a little bit about the investment policy that I'd be happy to cover.
We've been talking about that at our quarterly meeting also.
Claire, I think we have one slide on this. Thank you, Amanda. More right there. That's great. Right. So in your packet is a draft of an investment policy. This has been reviewed by the investment committee and approved. Prior to that, we had our advisors, PMA, look at it. They said it was met all their criteria. What are the takeaways? What do you need to know about that policy that in terms of changes? One is that it clarifies the role of the board of general government committee and the investment committee. That wasn't perfectly clear in the previous version. Essentially, the investment committee is the on-the-ground manager of the investment portfolio for the county. The general government committee has oversight over the investment committee, and the board makes it all happen. Importantly, the new document expands the standards of care. PMA helped us with that. It's not that the previous policy was loose with respect to standards of care, but there have been some changes with respect to that. And we want to make sure that the current policy is accurate and up to date. Probably the rubber hits the road issue for the board, for the general government committee and the investment committee are our investment criteria. So we've updated these and they are in this order. This is rank order. Liquidity, so we can get at the money when we need to. Safety, and I'll come back and talk about why that's not in the number one position. Yield, our return, and then diversification. So I think a reasonable question might be, well, why is liquidity number one on the list and not safety? And it's basically because our investments are essentially extremely safe. We are limited in what we can invest in. And so we literally can't take substantial risk. Amanda was talking about how we're backed up by the FDIC on our CDs. The rest of our investments are T-bills. The money that's in the cash management account is in the Wisconsin fund. So that's bulletproof according to our auditors. So liquidity becomes the primary concern of the investment committee. We have enough money to pay the obligations of the county. Yield is obviously important, and we love what's going on with yield right now. You may have heard about 10-year T-bills being way up, and that's way out there. Our policy right now limits us to 7-year horizon. And in fact, we don't have anything that's that far out. We try to keep it within 3 years. So we may give up a little bit of yield for liquidity. Diversification is just making sure all our eggs aren't in the same basket. Now, with the portfolio we've got, we don't have a very extensive risk profile. So diversification, while important, we don't necessarily manage to as much as we do the first three in the list. In terms of execution, the policy for the first time has a stepwise procedure telling the investment committee that we need to follow that order. That was not done in the previous version of the investment policy. We think it's really important for the investment committee to essentially have marching orders saying, use that rank ordering of criteria when you make your decisions. And it's laid out in this policy now for the first time. Those are the major changes. We will ask you to review the policy, and we will put an agenda item on next month's agenda for your approval, consideration and approval. If there are no more questions, or if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I'll sit down again.
Okay. Does that bring us to our wage study?
I'm not going to sit down very long, am I? Okay, this is exciting. Last month, when I was up here, I said, I don't think we're gonna get our wage study back in order to do any fine tuning for the 2024 budget based on what we learned. I was wrong. Our consultant got us our information earlier than we thought. We've had a chance to review it, and I'll get into some of the implications of that budgetarily in a second. Just to remind you of the big picture of the wage study, in our plan here in the county, we have a thing called a position classification system. So it's a little bit like a GSA list if you're a government employee. There's a set of grades, and every job in the county is put into one of those grades. Currently, there's grade 9 through 22 here in the county. We also have what's called a range model for wages. So instead of being specific steps within each of those grades, there's basically a range: minimum, midpoint, or market, and maximum. Does every county around here follow that same system? No. As an example, St. Croix County has a grade classification, a GSA kind of list, but they've got specific steps within their grade classification system. We haven't done that. We're not suggesting we should in the future. Just know that other counties do have that. We put out the pay grid on the internet for employees to see. It's a matter of public record. Pay grid plus the salary ranges. So what were we asking our consultant to do? We asked them, hey, review the jobs that we have. And there's more than 100. Is it 166? I can't remember the exact number. 118. Okay, I was off. Review all these jobs and tell us whether we've got them in the right grade. Look at the titles. Make sure the titles are as comparable as they can be to other counties. So when we do apples to apples, we're actually comparing apples to apples. Look at the pay. This is probably what the employees are most interested in. Tell us whether the job is paid right, not the employee. We'll worry about that later, but the job. Are we paying the right amount for the job in the competitive landscape? And then give us any recommendations that you got. That was the consultant's job. And they got it done for us earlier than we thought. So we're going to be able to take it into account for the 2024 budget year. Next slide. What did they tell us? They said, you have a grade classification system, it needs work. There's not enough grades in it, and you've got internal compression because of that. They said, your pay scale is imperfect, particularly at the low end. You haven't been paying, your minimums are too low compared to the other counties. Dunn, Pierce, St. Croix, Burnett, Chisago. On the low end, we haven't been paying enough. And some of our titles need work. So that's the message we've gotten back from the consultant. Next slide. So what are we going to do with that information? Starting today, we work with division directors to review the classification system. Do we have the jobs in the right level? So we'll be working with Mo, Tanya, when Bob gets back, Bob, to review every job that they've got in their organization to make sure their thinking matches the consultants. Some jobs are likely to move up or down. Not a lot, but some will. If a job moves up, people in that new grade in 2024 will get the new minimum at least. If the job is downgraded, we're not going to do anything pay-wise for that individual. They'll keep the same pay. Someone comes in later, replace that incumbent, we'll make the change then. The new minimums will go into effect on January 1. That means in the FY24 budget that Vince will review tomorrow. And you saw, next Tuesday, you saw in the budget graph, there's 6% more money for personnel in 24 than in 23. So we're gonna get the wage study kicked off for sure in 24, assuming the budget is approved. We're gonna raise folks that aren't at the minimum up to the minimum. And we are going to have some resources to make internal adjustments to handle equity issues. So that's our plan. We weren't sure we'd get all the way to the finish line, and it looks like we're gonna get there. So we're pretty proud of that. I don't know if I have anything else. Is there one more slide? I don't think so. Yeah. Any questions about the wage study?
So 6% is what the increase is that you're figuring.
That's the amount we have in the budget. and That's a good question. So what does that mean? That means that across every job, we have the latitude to make changes. Some folks will get bigger bumps than others. So when we raise the minimum up, some folks that are below the minimum will get an increase that is more than that 6%, which means some employees, math, will get less than 6%. Our goal is going to be to bring the minimum up. So the
Also
folks,
just saying the outlay total is 6%.
total outlay is 6%, but what I wouldn't want is for any person that's thinking about their wage,
It's not a 6%.
Everybody gets
you're not getting a
6%.
6% raise. That is
Some are
not
gonna stay right
very
where they're
close to
at.
where they are. In fact, there'll be, for
Because you're
very,
not cutting anyone, even though
that's correct.
they may be in a.
We're not gonna cut,
Occasional-
not gonna reduce anybody's pay. There are some people that will get very little, if anything. And there are some people that will get substantial raises because they're at the minimum and the minimum moves up. We have to do that to remain competitive.
That is only for 1 year. And then everyone would be in their spot.
Well, that's right. So if we can make
next
all,
year.
our goal with that 6% is to get as far with this as we can. And I mentioned that we're meeting with division directors even this week to try to figure out whether we got everything exactly right. And in the administrator's contingency is $150,000 additional dollars to handle this. Sherry, I'm looking at you. Is that the right number?
To handle this?
To handle internal adjustments. We have an extra amount of money in the contingency
Yes.
for the administrator. So there's that 6% that's in the budget right now, plus a little sliver for the administrator to catch things that we don't have exactly right.
And then like Russ said, the idea is that after that 1 year, we should.
This is
be
our
at
adjustment year.
Our
We're-
baseline, yeah.
And I mean, this is why I think we're gonna get a lot of the work done from the wage study in FY '24. That would be ideal, because then we don't have changes beyond that other than COLA and STEP if we choose to do those again. We're not trying to make a bunch of interim adjustments. Not everybody gets 6%.
So when that inevitably comes up later, remember this.
It'll come up
conversation.
later, I promise you. We have had my team over there smiling because I don't know how many emails, Teams messages and phone calls we get. What's the COLA gonna be this year? And it's a different year because we're making these adjustments. So,
Think about all the committees you've been to where people are coming and say, man, it's tough to compete. We got people that are talking about leaving and so on. And so this wage study said, okay, let's take a closer look and see if it's true, because many times you say, boy, if they're gonna offer you that much more money, you should go. And most of those folks found out it wasn't necessarily true. But in this case, we found out that our minimums, when we hire somebody at the very beginning at that low rate, it's not enough to hire those good people, so you're gonna have to bump them up. Many of those that have been here several years, in general, would say we're paying adequately, and that's kind of what we felt. We always felt that we do a pretty good job of paying our employees enough to keep, despite what rumors are out there. So this study solidifies what is actually happening in our marketplace, and we do have to make some corrections.
the last thing I'll mention is that our department and division directors did a great job. When you're at church and they pass the plate around, pull your wallet out. Well, we had that, and then we took the plate, we passed it around one more time, and then we passed it around one more time. So I really want to thank the division and department directors we would not be able, with a essentially flat revenue, we would not be able to do this if department and division directors hadn't looked at their budget and squeezed like a lemon every little bit of juice out of it. I really want to thank, and when I say, I would include the sheriff's office in that, Don. So thank you.
All right, how about our housing initiative?
Yes, I will ask Claire to put that on the board. If you recall, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution in which we had $200,000 to help fund local governments in assisting them in recruiting or helping housing get developed. So now it falls upon us to get that information to the communities and to have a process for them or an application for them to submit to us, so that one, staff can review it, and then two, we would bring decisions to this committee to say, what do you think? So it's an electronic application you can see here, and maybe you can scroll down slowly. But this is the Corporation Council, General Government Director, and myself went over it to say what types of information do we want and we'll get. Now, obviously, when we get the application from community, we pick up the phone and we talk to them, or we go visit to say what's going on and so on. But if you go through this list, you'll give a summary of the program. 70,000 max to a community, 10,000 per living unit. And it's a loan, an interest-free loan. But you get a description of what the project is, who it is that you're considering partnering with, what type of housing is it going to be? And this is a way that gives us assurance that it's not, you know, a person building a $2 million mansion on the lake, right? We're gonna make sure that it's something that's gonna meet the county's needs. And certain ones you click on and, you know, you get different questions that pop up, and then you'll submit it. It'll come here. Like I said, we'll review it. So the purpose of sharing this with you, just to update you on where we are, our hope is we'll present this to the board next Tuesday. And then we will send a communication out to the local governments and encourage them to call us with any questions or to fill out an application. I think it's something that, especially this first time, we'll work together with people. I don't think we're gonna have a community send in an application right away. I think this is something where one or two may say, hey, yeah, we've heard about it. We got somebody that's on the line now that we're trying to work through. And we'll work through it that way. So
When we receive this application, what happens to it? It goes to you and then to a committee, or?
yes, it'll be reviewed internally. And then we would come to this committee and say,
Okay.
here's what we recommend. What do you guys, you know, what would you like to
Gotcha. But it goes to
add?
general government and then county board.
I don't think it needs to go to the county board. It would
already
just
been-
be this committee, because we've already approved the
Conditions.
resolution. Now it's just a matter of how we're gonna pick and choose, and I think it states for this committee to be the
Okay.
deciding. Keep it as simple as possible.
Good.
Is it generally gonna be like, here's the applications we've gotten, here's our thoughts on what we recommend?
And to give you the opportunities to say, yes, we agree, or we don't agree, or second, we ask more questions, and let's go ask these questions.
Okay.
So
Does it matter if it's a rental unit or owner occupied unit? Like, what's the reason for that question, I guess?
Just more.
There's if you were to click on that, there's a question about whether the rental units are gonna be owned by a nonprofit, because there was some concern on the board previously about taxes, yeah,
Oh.
so.
There's been projects before,
I don't increase the tax bill.
Exactly.
I got you.
one then looked rosy in the beginning and then got
Switched it
manipulated
over.
over years to then just be done.
All right, any more questions on that? If not, we gotta review and update our committee work plan.
think it's pretty up to date. I think in November you see budget technical amendments if anything comes up in the October presentation. Are any of you aware of any changes that need to go onto our work plan?
Just so we'll have that investment policy to send to the full board.
November, December.
I suppose it could wait. As we'll get it done.
I seen in May, we were supposed to have a discussion of the WPPA contract. We probably better get that back in our plan somewhere.
Either meeting this week, and maybe an update next.
Yeah, the ball's really in their court at this point.
Right. Well, we should just keep it on our agenda anyway, so we can discuss it if we need to. Which is probably our next item. All right, how about subject matters for our next meeting? I think a couple have already been.
I think investment policy ratification, possibly WPPA. Can you guys think of anything else?
We almost got all the work done.
Budget, you never know what's gonna pop up on that.
So will our next meeting be our last shot at the budget or not? If we want changes to it. We should do it in committee and not try to do it on the floor.
Preferably not in
That night.
November. Yeah, you would hope this.
That
committee-
really
Yeah.
can get bad.
Because our general government meeting will be one day prior to our full county board meeting next month. Because of deer season, is that correct?
You're right, because it is the second Tuesday.
That's correct.
So it'll be the day before. So, but October, generally what's happened, as you guys know, is the October meeting, we do the presentation, there's some discussions. People make some recommendations or questions. Hopefully, that gives us time then to take any proposed changes, put it into the budget, hold the public hearing at the next board meeting. You hope that you don't have any last minute, I won't call them shenanigans, but last minute amendments to the budget at that point, because they haven't been discussed in committee. They haven't been discussed necessarily in public, so.
So will there be an opportunity at the county, this upcoming county board meeting for supervisors to make recommendations or bring it up for discussion?
In the October board meeting, yes.
But that'll be like the last chance.
We hope.
Should be.
Yeah, should be.
Not that it won't.
Should be, and that's why every committee, has been hearing these things in general. This month at the committees, if there are any proposed changes, we hope that they bring it up in the committee meeting. But certainly you could do it at the October board meeting as well.
All right, anything else? One item to go, otherwise.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
All right.
And adjourned at